When the doctor said Grandpa might not survive the night, I was on the next flight home. When I texted my dad, he sent me a photo of the beach. I'm Victoria Halston. I'm 28, a home designer based in Austin. I build spaces meant to hold love and memory, but nothing in my career prepared me for what I was about to face. 2 weeks ago, my grandfather William Halston collapsed from a stroke. He was the one who raised me when my parents were too busy. The one who taught me how to hold a hammer and a paintbrush before I even knew how to ride a bike. And while he lay unconscious in the ICU, my dad took the rest of the family on vacation. I stayed behind, alone, praying he'd wake up. He did. But when I brought him home, his house was gone. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear. The moment I stepped into the ICU at St. Augustine Memorial, my stomach turned. Machines beeped. Nurses whispered. And there, in a room tucked into the corner, lay the man who built my world. Grandpa. His skin looked too pale against the white sheets. His chest rose and fell under the rhythm of a ventilator. Tubes ran into his arms. The strong hands that once held me steady when I was learning to walk now lay limp beside him. I stood there, frozen, unable to move. Then slowly, I stepped forward and sat by his bed. I reached out and wrapped my fingers around his. They were cold. I whispered, "I'm here, Grandpa. I'm not going anywhere." I pulled out my phone and called my dad. He answered on the second ring. I heard laughter and crashing waves in the background. "Vic? What's up?" I swallowed hard. "Dad, are you coming back?" He's not okay. Grandpa's on life support." There was a pause. "Yeah, the doctor called me too. But we're in Sarasota now. Everything's booked and non-refundable. Look, just keep us updated, all right?" "Dad, this isn't a conference. It's Grandpa." He sighed. "I get it. But someone has to be with him. You're there. That's what matters." I hung up without saying goodbye. My hand trembled. I looked back at Grandpa. "They're not coming," I whispered. "But I'm here. I'll stay. Even if I have to sleep in this chair every night." And I did. That first night, I didn't sleep. I sat in that stiff plastic chair, listening to the machines beep and watching the faint rise and fall of his chest. I talked to him. I told him about the house I was redesigning in Austin, about the new cactus I forgot to water, about how the city didn't feel like home without his voice on the phone. When the nurse came in to check his vitals, she looked at me kindly. "He's lucky," she said. "Most folks don't have anyone sitting bedside like this." Lucky. That word echoed in my head. My grandfather wasn't lucky. He was abandoned. By his son. By the family he gave everything to. Except me. I wasn't going to leave him. Not again. Not ever. The days started to blend together. Morning rounds, machine checks, the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator. The only constants were the smell of sanitizer and the soft pressure of my grandfather's hand resting under mine. I barely left his side. Sometimes I'd read to him. Sometimes I just talked. I told him about how the basil in my kitchen window finally sprouted, how the summer heat in Austin was unbearable, how I burned lasagna the night before I flew out. It didn't matter if he could hear me. I needed to believe he could. Then the photos started. It began with a ping from my phone one afternoon. I checked it without thinking. A message from my sister Talia. "Family time, finally. Look at this view." Attached. A photo of our parents and Talia grinning in front of a bright blue ocean, all three of them in matching tropical shirts. Cocktails in hand, sand between their toes. Not a trace of worry in their eyes. I stared at the image, the taste of salt rising in my throat, only it wasn't from the sea. They were smiling. While Grandpa lay unconscious with machines keeping him alive, they were drinking rum under palm trees. I texted back. "He still hasn't woken up. His blood pressure dropped this morning. Can you come back?" Talia left me on red. Later that night, I called Dad again. This time, I was shaking. "Dad, please," I said. "His kidneys are weakening. The doctor said it's touch and go. We don't know how long he has." He sighed. "Vic, we already talked about this. What do you want me to do?" Cancel everything? We've got 2 days left. You're there, you're doing great. We'll visit when we get back. You haven't even called to check on him. Because I know you'll tell me what I need to know, he snapped. Why are you making this so dramatic? I wanted to scream, but I just hung up. That night, I sat by Grandpa's bed and scrolled through Talia's Instagram. Photo after photo, seafood platters, jet skis, her smiling in sunglasses, captioned, "Family is everything." I stared at that sentence until it blurred. Family is everything. Then why was I the only one who stayed? I looked at Grandpa's face, the lines, the soft gray stubble, the tiny crease at the corner of his eyes that always deepened when he smiled. He didn't look peaceful. He looked alone. I reached for his hand. I don't care what they're doing, I whispered. I'm here, and I'll be here every single day until you open your eyes. Then I leaned close, like I used to when I was little and scared of the dark. You're not alone, Grandpa, not this time. It happened on the 12th morning. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours the night before. I dozed off in the chair beside Grandpa's bed, my neck aching from the strange angle. The hospital room was cold, the air conditioner humming low above me. I jolted awake when the nurse came in to check his vitals. Still stable, still unresponsive. Same as always. I nodded blankly and waited until she left. Then, like every morning, I pulled out Grandpa's favorite poetry book, the worn leather one I'd taken from his old study before heading to the hospital. It smelled like cedar and dust, and the pages were full of his penciled notes in the margins. I cleared my throat and began to read. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. But I have promises to keep. And that's when I felt it. The slightest twitch. A soft pressure around my fingers. I froze. I looked down, and his hand was closing around mine. Not a spasm, not a reflex. A squeeze. Deliberate. Present. My heart nearly stopped. Grandpa? I whispered. His eyelids fluttered. My voice cracked. Grandpa, it's me. It's Victoria. Can you hear me? Then slowly, like a sunrise breaking over a long, dark night, his eyes opened. They were hazy, unsure, but they were alive, and they were looking right at me. Tears flooded my eyes before I even realized I was crying. I pressed my forehead against his knuckles, sobbing into his hand. You're back, I choked. You're really back. His lips didn't move. He couldn't speak yet, but his eyes softened, and I knew he recognized me. He was still in there. I hit the call button for the nurse, then held his hand like it was a rope, pulling me back from the edge of grief. Within seconds, the room filled with people, nurses, machines beeping faster, a doctor in a rush. I barely registered their words. But I remember one sentence clearly. He's stabilized. It's a very good sign. I nodded through tears. Later that day, when they had him resting and monitored more closely, I stepped into the hallway and called my dad again. He picked up, sounding casual. Hey, what's going on? He opened his eyes. I said, this morning. He's awake. A pause. Wow, that's good. That's really good. You can come back now, I said. He's conscious. He knows I'm here. I think he'd want to see you. Dad's voice didn't change. Vic, we've only got a few days left here. Let him rest. We'll come by when we get back. I felt my throat close. He almost died, Dad. You weren't here. You didn't see it. And you were, he replied. That's enough. He hung up. I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the linoleum tiles. Then I went back to Grandpa's room, sat beside him, and took his hand again. We don't need them, I whispered. You have me. And in that moment, in that quiet space between machines and memory, I meant every word. 2 weeks after he first opened his eyes, the doctors finally gave their cautious blessing. He's stable enough to be discharged, Dr. Evans said, folding his arms. But he'll need full-time care, physical therapy, and a wheelchair until he regains more strength. I'll take care of everything, I replied without hesitation. That afternoon I wheeled Grandpa out of St. Augustine Memorial under the warm southern sun. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, the first one outside sterile hospital air in weeks. The breeze lifted his thinning silver hair, and I saw the corners of his mouth twitch, not quite a smile, but something close. "I'm taking you home," I whispered. "Your garden's probably gone wild without you." He nodded weakly. I'd rented a specialized transport van and packed some of his essentials from the hospital room. The plan was simple. Take him back to the house he'd lived in for over 40 years, the one with the creaky porch, the ivy-covered fence, and the giant oak tree he planted when I was born. I turned down the familiar street, my heart swelling. But something was wrong. The front gate was wide open, and there was a strange silver sedan parked in the driveway. The curtains in the front windows were drawn, shut tight. Grandpa always left them open to let in the morning light. I slowed the van. A lump formed in my throat. "No," I said aloud. I parked and helped Grandpa into his wheelchair. As I pushed him down the walkway, my hands started to tremble. I told myself there must be a mistake. Maybe friends were watching the house. Maybe someone was fixing something. But the moment the door opened, I knew. A young woman with a ponytail and a plain white t-shirt stepped into view. She looked startled when she saw us. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. I blinked. I'm Victoria Halston. This is William Halston. This is his home." Her brows furrowed. She turned back inside and called for someone. A man about my age, holding a coffee mug, stepped out behind her. "Wait, Halston? I'm sorry. We bought this house a week ago." I felt the ground tilt under me. "No?" I whispered. "That's not possible. Who sold it?" He disappeared briefly, then returned with a folder. "Martin Halston. He signed the deed. Said he had full power of attorney. Everything was verified. I'm really sorry." Martin Halston. My father. I heard Grandpa's breath hitch. I looked down, his eyes were glassy, his hands gripping the wheelchair tightly. My house?" he said faintly. I dropped to my knees beside him. "I didn't know," I whispered. "Grandpa, I didn't know." The man and woman at the door looked stricken. "If we'd known," the woman began. But I didn't hear the rest. All I could hear was blood rushing in my ears, the roaring sound of betrayal. The garden was gone. The oak tree was still there, but the wind chimes Grandpa had hung were missing. The porch had been repainted, erasing decades of memory with a single coat. I helped Grandpa back into the van, my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. We checked into a small hotel nearby. I asked for a ground floor room, wide doors, and silence. Grandpa didn't say a word that night. He just stared out the window, his expression hollow. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fists balled in my lap, my heart a furnace. He did this while Grandpa was in the ICU. He sold the house. He never planned to tell us. That night, while Grandpa slept, I opened my laptop. And I swore to myself, I would find out everything. And I would make him answer for it. I didn't sleep that night. Grandpa lay still in the hotel bed, his chest rising and falling with the slow rhythm of exhaustion and heartbreak. I sat at the small desk by the window, my laptop open, the screen casting a pale blue light over the shadows of my rage. I pulled up the digital copy of the property transfer the new homeowner had given me. There it was. Martin Halston. My father's signature. Next to it, a scanned power of attorney form dated 2 years ago. The memory hit me like a flash. Dad had mentioned something back then, saying, "It's just in case, Vic. With Grandpa getting older, we need to be ready for medical stuff." Medical stuff. This wasn't about medication or insurance. It was a broad-spectrum POA, giving him full rights over Grandpa's assets, including the power to sell the house. I felt physically sick. But I needed more than outrage. I needed facts. At 8:01 a.m., I called Harrison, Blythe, the family's longtime legal firm back in Springfield. I spoke to Helen Blythe, one of the founding partners and a woman who had known Grandpa since before I was born. "Victoria," she said gently after hearing why I called. "I was afraid you'd learn about the sale this way." "You knew?" I asked, my voice cold. I knew it had happened, yes, But Martin didn't involve us in the transaction. He worked with a different real estate firm quickly, quietly. Can I come in today? I asked. Of course, she said. There's something I think you should see. That afternoon, I left Grandpa in a care center just 2 blocks from the hotel. It was quiet, clean, and staffed with kind eyes. I kissed his forehead, whispered I'd be back by dinner, and headed straight to the law office. Helen met me with a thick folder in her hands. This, she said, sliding it across the desk, is the original POA your grandfather signed. I had advised him not to grant full asset control, but he insisted. It's Martin, he told me. He's my son. He wouldn't do anything wrong. I opened the file. There it was, my grandfather's signature, shaky, but real, and the box checked. Full financial and property authority. I flipped to the final page. The house had been sold for $295,000. I blinked. That's at least $150,000 under market, I muttered. Helen nodded grimly. A cash buyer. Quick close. Almost no inspection period. I stared at the page like it was a betrayal etched in ink. Do you know where the proceeds went? I do, she said, and handed me a printout. Every cent had been wired directly into a personal checking account under Martin Halston's name. Not a trust. Not a care fund. Not even a joint account. Just him. My chest ached like someone had plunged a hand straight into my ribs and twisted. He had taken everything. While Grandpa lay dying, he cashed in his future and went on vacation with the money. I want to sue, I said, my voice steady despite the heat rising behind my eyes. Helen paused. It's complicated, Victoria. The POA is valid. The sale is legal on the surface, but if we can prove abuse of fiduciary duty, especially while your grandfather was incapacitated, you may have a case. I don't care how complicated it is, I said. He doesn't get to bury the past and tan on the beach. I want him to answer for what he's done. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel helpless. I felt ready. I sent the letter that night. It was formal, sharp, and precise, a demand notice, drafted with Helen's help. In it, I laid out everything. The timeline of the sale, the abuse of power of attorney, the suspiciously low price, and the transfer of funds to a private account. I demanded the full return of the $295,000 plus the $150,000 in value disparity. 10 days to respond, or I'd file suit. I hit send. And then I waited. It didn't take long. The next evening, as I was helping Grandpa sip water at the care center, my phone rang. Dad. I stepped outside before answering. His voice, when it came through, was furious. Are you out of your mind, Victoria? Hi, Dad, I said flatly. Got the letter? A lawsuit? Against your own father? Over a house? No, I said. Over a betrayal. Don't get dramatic. Everything I did was legal. That house was falling apart. It was better for everyone. Everyone? I snapped. Or just you? There was silence on the line. Then, you think I pocketed the money? You think I'm some kind of thief? I don't think, Dad. I have bank records. I have witnesses. I have a notary who remembers you rushing Grandpa to sign that POA without a clear explanation. His voice turned cold. Then go ahead. Sue me. But don't call me your father again. He hung up. I stood in the parking lot of the care center, the cicadas buzzing in the Georgia dusk, phone still pressed to my ear long after the call had ended. I had always thought that no matter what, family could fight and come back together. But something in his voice told me this time, the bridge had truly burned. The next morning, Mom called. Her voice trembled, not with sadness but with frustration. Why are you doing this to us, Victoria? You're tearing the family apart. I closed my eyes. No, Mom. I'm trying to protect Grandpa. I'm trying to fix what shouldn't have happened. It's just a house, she said. You've made it into a war. It was his life, I replied, and he didn't get to say goodbye to it. That afternoon, a text came in from Talia. You're seriously embarrassing us. If you're mad at Dad, Fine. But taking him to court? That's low. I didn't reply. They had made their choice. And I had made mine. Back at the care center, Grandpa looked up as I walked in. He was sitting by the window, eyes tired but clear. I took his hand. I might have to fight this alone, I whispered. They've all turned their backs. He squeezed my fingers. You're not alone, he said softly. And that was enough. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at the Springfield County Courthouse, an old brick building with ivy crawling up its sides and worn marble floors that echoed with every step I took. I wore a navy suit. No makeup, hair tied back. This wasn't about appearances. This was about truth. Helen walked beside me, carrying the evidence files we had spent weeks gathering: sale contracts, bank transfers, POA documents, and the statement from the notary, Mr. Delaney. She gave me a reassuring nod as we approached the courtroom door. Inside, my father was already seated at the defendant's table, wearing a smug gray blazer and the same look he always wore at business dinners: detached, composed, impenetrable. My mother and Talia sat behind him. They didn't even look at me. I took a deep breath and walked forward. When Grandpa was wheeled in, assisted by a nurse, he looked so small in the oversized chair, but his eyes found mine immediately. I nodded. He nodded back. That was all I needed. The judge, Honorable Marcia Renner, entered the room. Her gaze was sharp but fair. Let's begin. Helen opened with a calm, clear summary. Your Honor, this is a case of financial exploitation under the guise of legality. Mr. Martin Halston used a sweeping power of attorney to sell his father's home, not for medical necessity, not in the best interest of the principal, but for personal gain while Mr. William Halston was lying unconscious in an ICU. She laid out the facts methodically. The sale price was significantly below market value. The funds were wired to a personal checking account. No expenses went toward Grandpa's care. The POA was signed under misleading pretenses, as confirmed by a licensed notary. Then I stood up. My voice shook for the first sentence. Then it didn't. I watched my grandfather lay motionless in a hospital bed for 13 days, while the man he trusted most, his own son, was at the beach, smiling in vacation selfies. And when I finally brought Grandpa home, his home was gone. I turned toward my father. He didn't just sell a house, he erased a life without permission, without conscience, without remorse. My father's attorney, a slick-talking man named Brennan, stood and delivered a counter-argument full of polished language. The POA was valid. The sale was legal. Mr. Halston acted within his rights to ensure his father's long-term care. He spun it like a sacrifice. A financial decision made out of love. Then Mr. Delaney, the notary, took the stand. I remember the day the POA was signed. Mr. Halston rushed the process. William looked tired. I asked if he fully understood, but Martin cut in. Dad trusts me, he said. I regret not pushing further. That moment was the crack in the defense. Then came the final piece, a bank statement showing every dollar of the sale resting in my father's personal vacation fund account. Not a medical trust. Not even a care reserve. Just him. The judge sat silently for a long time before speaking. I will issue a final ruling in 2 weeks. I left the courtroom feeling numb. Outside, the sky was gray, the air thick with spring humidity. Grandpa sat beside me in his wheelchair, looking at nothing in particular. My mother and Talia walked past. She paused, looking at me. Was it worth it? She asked softly. I didn't answer. But Grandpa did. Yes. 2 weeks later, the ruling came. Judge Renner's voice was steady and sharp over the speakerphone, as I sat beside Grandpa in the hotel room. While the POA remains legally valid, she said, the actions taken by Mr. Martin Halston, particularly the sale of the property during the principal's incapacitation and the personal use of proceeds, constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. The verdict. Full repayment of the $295,000. Restitution for undervaluing the home, another $150,000. Revocation of POA? A written statement of accountability filed with the county. I turned to Grandpa. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes were clear and wet. I didn't think anyone would ever fight for me, he whispered. You fought for me first, I said. I'm just returning the favor. We used a portion of the funds to buy a small, sunlit cottage just outside of Springfield. It wasn't grand. It didn't have the old oak tree or the porch swing. But it had a rose bush, a little garden out back, and a kitchen that smelled like the future. I placed Grandpa's old armchair by the front window and hung his wind chimes outside. I brewed peppermint tea every morning, the way he used to for me after school. He started walking more, slowly, with a cane. And sometimes, he laughed again. One evening, as I was trimming dead blooms off the rose bush, I saw two familiar figures at the gate. Mom and Talia. They held a gift box store-bought cookies, tied with gold ribbon. Their expressions were stiff, uncertain. Can we see him? My mom asked. I hesitated, then let them in. Inside, Grandpa looked up from his crossword. He didn't scowl, he didn't rage. He simply said, I'm not angry. I'm awake now. It was quiet after that. They left. And we didn't speak of it again. A year has passed. Every morning, I brew tea. Grandpa sits outside, reading. The garden is blooming. Peacefully, quietly. Sometimes, when the wind picks up and I hear the chimes, I think about what we lost. But, more often, I think about what we reclaimed. Not the house. Not the money. But the right to choose who we stand by, and who we call family not by name, but by heart.